Every young basketball player not only dreams about making it to the NBA, but also being good enough to sign a lucrative shoe deal with a top-tier company. Usually, these deals are reserved for only the best players in the NBA who have either piled up enough accolades to deserve them, or have immense potential upon arrival to the league. But in some cases, shoe deals didn't end up being good business for the involved companies. Join us now as we take a look at the 10 worst shoe deals in NBA history. Number 10. Matthew Dellavedova, Peak. It usually takes a couple very nice playoff runs or a highly decorated basketball career prior to players making their NBA debut before they can get a juicy shoe deal. But in Matthew Dellavedova's case, a couple of solid playoff games filling in for an injured Kyrie Irving were enough before he got a shoe deal and a signature shoe. Shortly before the start of the 2016 NBA Finals, after which Dellavedova became an NBA champion, Peak announced a 3-year deal with Delly that included his signature shoe, the Delly Ones, which he debuted in that year's finals. Granted, Peak isn't a well-established basketball brand, and it's hard for them to sign the big fish, but they literally gave a signature shoe to a bench player. Up to that point, Dellavedova had averaged around 6 points and 3 assists while shooting under 40% from the field. And even when he surprised people in 2015 with his hustle and aggressiveness in the NBA Finals, his 7 points and 3 assists on 34.6% field goals was not nearly worthy of a signature shoe. Looking back, he might as well have bought a lottery ticket and won the whole thing with how much luck he had that 2016 summer, as after winning a championship in Cleveland, the Milwaukee Bucks signed him to a 4-year, $38 million deal. His stats haven't gotten any better, but the man is swimming in a pool of cash. Number 9. KWAME Brown, ADIDAS, and Nike. It's only fitting that the biggest draft bust in NBA history also has one of the worst shoe deals ever, right? KWAME Brown's shoe sponsorship story is quite a funny one, as Adidas had struck a deal with him before he was officially taken number 1 overall in the 2001 draft. But then, the Washington Wizards won the lottery, and eventually took Brown number 1, and everything changed. Then Wizards president Michael Jordan turned Nike into a billion-dollar company with his success at selling basketball shoes. The Wizards, of course, wore Nike apparel. There were huge Nike swoosh logos at the team's practice facility. Had Brown been drafted anywhere else, he probably would have remained with Adidas. Regardless of the logo in his shoes, Brown would have been a bust no matter what he wore. There's a case to be made he would have developed into a better player on a team different than Washington, but history wasn't on KWAME's side, and he ended up being a huge failure for Nike. He didn't care much about the brand either. As he once said, "I wear whatever anybody sends to me." Number 8. Evan Turner, Li-NING. Speaking of players who had really high expectations and flopped, Evan Turner is somebody else who accurately fits that description. There was a lot of hype surrounding him due to his college basketball career, and the Philadelphia 76ers believed all of it by drafting him 2nd overall in the 2010 draft. They weren't the only ones who fell for the trap, as Chinese company Li-NING was also quick to sign him, give him a signature shoe, and make him the face of their brand. Li-NING, the biggest sports apparel company in China, was trying to get their foot into the American markets, and they tried doing so by associating themselves with some new blood. It's hard to blame them, as Turner looked like the next big NBA star back then, and there were many teams interested in him. For one reason or another, his NBA stardom never came to be, but he has had a decent role player career. He's played for 5 teams throughout his 10-year career, and averages 10 points and 4 assists on 43.4% overall shooting and 29.4% from 3. Again, not a bad career at all, but not worthy to be a face for Li-NING's American franchise. The one thing Turner was useful for was convincing Portland Trail Blazers teammate CJ McCollum to sign with Li-NING and become their new big star. Number 7. Bryant Reeves, Warner Brothers. Yeah, you heard that right, Warner Brothers Company. After making an absolute banger basketball movie in Space Jam, the movie studio decided to enter the basketball sneaker market. Their 2-star players to kick off their new brand were Glenn Rice, who wasn't with them for long, and Bryant Reeves. You might or might not remember Reeves as the then Vancouver, now Memphis Grizzlies franchise's first ever draft pick. They took him 6th overall in 1995, and he ended up having an okay 6-year career with them. These shoes looked as ugly as much as they looked uncomfortable to wear. And just think about it. A movie studio decides to launch a basketball shoe branch that is headlined by an unproven 7-footer and a small market team. The idea had the word disaster written all over it, and that's exactly what it turned out to be. Thankfully, they've stuck to movies since that total failure. Number 6. Chandler Parsons, ANTA. Chandler Parsons. He's usually such a polarizing figure among the NBA fan base because his ridiculously high contract doesn't correlate with his awful stats. But most casual viewers don't recall how good he was back in his Houston Rockets days, as well as early on in his Dallas Mavericks run. But then injuries ruined his career. Chandler was drafted by the Rockets with the 38th pick in the 2011 draft. He surprisingly became a rotation player right away in his first season, something you rarely ever hear about second-round picks. In his third season, he was already averaging 17 points and 4 assists on 47.2% shooting from the field and 37% from deep. But due to him still playing under his rookie second-round pick contract that was worth under $1 million, he decided to secure the bag and ditch Nike to sign with Chinese company ANTA. ANTA offered him a lengthy deal, as their partnership was aided by the connection the Rockets franchise had with the Chinese market. But unfortunately, as we said earlier, his career got ruined by injuries. Over the last 4 years, his averages dipped considerably and the 6'9" sharpshooter could never return to his previous form. ANTA's two biggest signees ever are Kevin Garnett and Rajon Rondo, so Parsons wasn't becoming the best ANTA star ever. But there was a chance that his contract with ANTA actually could have helped build the shoe brand up if he hadn't had such bad luck. Do you think Parsons' contract with ANTA would have still been one of the worst ever if he hadn't suffered as many injuries? Let us know in the comments down below. Number 5. Luis SCOLA, ANTA. The Rockets had such strong connections with the Chinese market thanks to the arrival of Yao Ming to the team in the 2000s, and then due to the addition of Jeremy Lin to the roster in the early 2010s. Another player that heavily benefited from this link was former Rocket Luis SCOLA. He had a promising first couple of years in the league, once averaging as many as 18 points and 8 rebounds as a starter in Houston, but debuting in the NBA at 27 years old didn't do him any favors, as he fell off a cliff shortly after his peak season in 2011. Still, 3 solid NBA seasons were enough for ANTA to pull the trigger on SCOLA. It's also worth noting SCOLA played an important role in Argentina's gold medal in the 2004 Olympics, as they infamously beat a stacked United States squad in the tournament semifinals. SCOLA looked like he had a couple of promising seasons left in the NBA after signing with ANTA, but it wasn't the case. After leaving the NBA, SCOLA actually played in the Chinese Basketball Association, something that probably had a lot to do with his ANTA sponsorship. Number 4. Eddie Curry, Nike. Eddie Curry ended up being another huge NBA draft disappointment. It's harder to call him a bust because he had a couple of very productive seasons, but that's about as much as anybody can say. A combination of attitude issues, very bad eating and workout habits, and untimely injuries destroyed Curry's career after showing a ton of promise early on. After becoming a full-time starter, Curry was a consistent 15-point scorer for the Chicago Bulls. But his rebounding numbers and his defensive efforts left a lot to be desired, as he was both a mediocre defender and rebounder. Certainly much worse than you'd expect from a 7-footer that went 4th overall in the NBA draft. He was then traded to the Knicks, where he had a resurgence season in which he averaged 20 points and 7 boards as the focal point of the team's offense, but the success was short-lived. He got into weight issues and ended up playing only 26 NBA games in the next 5 seasons after getting traded from New York and waived immediately after. Curry was certainly one of the biggest misses in Nike's strong portfolio of athletes. Number 3. George Hill, peak. George Hill is the next good, not great player on the list that somehow ended up getting a signature shoe. Hill was consistently a double-digit scorer since his first couple years in the league, but earned his peak deal after breaking out as a member of the Indiana Pacers. Still, he was never more than a solid point guard who didn't have many different ways to score and wasn't an outstanding playmaker by any means. In his 5-year Pacers tenure, Hill averaged 12 points and 4 assists. His peak monster GH3s sold in stores for years, with their level of success still unknown to this day. But judging by the fact Peak didn't re-sign Hill after their initial deal expired, it's safe to assume they didn't do very well. Hill's been wearing mostly Nikes for the last couple of years, as his partnership with Peak was a huge fail. Number 2. Jimmer Fredette, Spalding. The college sensation Jimmer Fredette entered the NBA after being named 2011 National Player of the Year by sites like the Associated Press and Sports Illustrated. Fredette also won the 2011 ESPY Award for Best Male College Athlete. It wasn't that surprising, as Fredette averaged 29 points and 4 assists per game in his senior college season. As such, Spalding looked to acquire somebody that would hopefully become the NBA's next big star. As crazy as this sounds, Spalding wasn't content with providing the official NBA game balls. They wanted to become players in the shoe market. But Jimmer Fredette proved to be a bad endorser. In the NBA, Fredette never averaged over 8 points per game and struggled to remain an efficient shooter. His shoe deal with Spalding went as well as his NBA career, as he was already playing in China just 5 years after getting drafted in the NBA. Number 1. John Wall, Adidas. Don't get us wrong, John Wall has had a pretty nice NBA career so far. He averages around 19 points and 9 assists per game throughout his decade-long professional basketball career, so he certainly deserved to sign a shoe deal with Adidas. But unfortunately, Wall's signature shoes were never a big hit in the market. He had a couple shoes under the J-Wall series with Adidas, but apparently sales were underwhelming. Still, both parts agreed to a 5-year extension in 2018 that would keep Wall a member of the Adidas brand, even though he probably wouldn't be getting any more signature sneakers. But as fate would have it, Wall struggled with injuries ever since, and missed over 1.5 years of court action after a left heel injury that required surgery, then suffering from an infection in one of those incisions from that surgery, and finally rupturing his Achilles tendon when he slipped and fell at his house in the middle of recovery. Wall had been earning a base salary of close to $1 million per season with Adidas, so the brand was desperate to get rid of him. They got their wish granted, as Wall and Adidas agreed to a contract buyout in late 2019. He may not have turned into a bad player, but all of the money Adidas put into him ended up being a terrible investment. Which one of these players was the worst shoe deal for their respective company? Did we miss any other terrible shoe deals on our list? Let us know in the comments down below. And as always, don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel.